Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Steve Barr. I'm the chairman of the House Veteran Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee, and I'd like to call this committee to order. And also, this is a joint hearing with Chairman Marsico. The first order of business here, I would ask Representative Saccone if he would lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance. Over here, behind you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're here today to examine the Pennsylvania State Police Emergency Towing Pilot Program that is being conducted in Western Pennsylvania. We have with us today several panels of affected groups and stakeholders in the pilot program. We are looking forward to some excellent dialogue on this important emergency towing issue. The hearing today is being conducted jointly with the House Judiciary Committee, and we also have invited House members from the affected pilot program areas to join us today, since many of them have expressed great interest in this pilot program. What I'd like to do first is maybe go around the room and there are a lot of legislators here, and have the legislators introduce themselves, starting at the table to my far left. Representative Hackett, if you want to start.
Thank you, Chair. I can't think of a better place. Representative Joe Hackett, 161st District, Delaware County.
Good morning, everyone. Representative Ryan Bizzaro, 3rd District, Erie County.
Good morning, Maria Donatucci, 185th, that's Philadelphia County and Delaware County.
Good morning, Mark Keller, the 86th District, which is Perry and Franklin.
Morning, Brian Cutler, 100th District, Southern Lancaster County.
Good morning, Dom Costa, 21st District, Allegheny County, City of Pittsburgh.
Mark Gillen, Berks County.
Good morning, Lee James, Venango County, District 64, and part of northern Butler County.
Good morning, Representative Marshall, Beaver County, 14th District.
Good morning, Representative Kathy Rapp, Warren, Forest, and McKean Counties.
Good morning, I'm Representative Rick Saccone. I'm from the Fighting 39th District of Southern Allegheny and Northern Washington Counties.
Down here. Can we get the staff also to introduce themselves? Good. Harry?
Amy Britton, Minority Executive Director for Christopher. Tom Denton, Executive Director for Sean Harris, Chairman for Majority.
So we know who's here. Good.
Tom Fiala-Drone, District 127, Reading.
Ron Marsico, Chair of the Judiciary Committee, 105th, Dauphin County.
Rick O'Leary, Executive Director for Chairman Barr.
Representative Chris Sinat, I'm the Democratic Chairman of the House Veteran Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee. I'm from Lawrence County.
Dick Stevenson, Mercer County, 8th District, Mercer and Butler.
I would ask the chairman here if they would like to make a statement first, starting with Chairman Marsico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for convening this hearing. Look forward to the testimony. This has been going on for, I guess, a number of months now, and we've been hearing reports of concerns from the towers, and also we're looking forward to hearing the testimony, especially from the Pennsylvania State Police. So thanks for arranging this meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Sonata.
Thank you, Chairman Barr. I, too, am looking forward to this hearing. It's been something that's been talked about and planned for a while now. It's great to see so many people have come out today. I, too, know this is a very important issue, especially to many of my towers back in my area. And I look forward to listening and hearing and potentially questioning all sides on this important issue.
Thank you, Chairman. Also with us today is Representative Dick Stevenson, who is a member of the House leadership team and who is our caucus administrator. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Chairman Barr. Again, I'd like to just add my words of welcome to everyone who's here. We're looking forward to an informative and helpful hearing today on this critically important issue to so many people. And hopefully, as a result of this hearing, we'll be able to move this issue forward and reach some resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Calderon.
Thank you,
I killed the
Mr.
name.
Chairman. I look forward to the testimony and appreciate everybody showing up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have just a few remarks, and one of the reasons we wanted the hearing today is one of our big concerns was the fact that the stakeholder meetings were held throughout, I guess, several years now to get us to this point of a contract being signed for a third-party dispatch group to come in. During the stakeholder meetings, which we're all familiar with here as legislators, we have numerous stakeholder meetings whenever we pass legislation. My biggest concern is the fact that the towers, the people that are involved in this contract, the people most affected by this, were never invited to any of the stakeholder meetings, which in my feeling warrants this hearing to be held. So first of all, that we can hear from the towers, from the state police, and why this happened. But I also, as a representative who've taken a great interest in this industry, have also was asked to be part of the stakeholder meetings and was never invited. Okay, the first responders were not their considerations. The first responders, our firefighters, our EMTs, are an important part of a response when there's a traffic accident out on our highways. They were never invited to these stakeholders meetings. Their suggestions, their ideas, their thoughts and concerns were never taken into consideration, is one of the main reasons that I thought we needed to move forward with this hearing. So with us today, I'm going to get, at this time, I'd like to get our first panel to testify as Pennsylvania State Police. We have Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens, Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Major Ed Hoke, Director of Bureau of Patrol, and Captain Patrick Brinkley, Director Bureau of Research and Development. Thank you for being here today, gentlemen, and you may begin your testimony when ready.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and you've introduced the members, but just for clarification, this is Major Edward Hoke on my right and Captain Patrick Brinkley on my left. We do appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the emergency towing pilot project being conducted by our department. It has always been the policy of the Pennsylvania State Police to provide assistance to individuals involved in highway incidents in a timely, efficient, and fair manner. Each year, troopers respond to thousands of such calls requiring emergency towing services. These incidents range from assisting motorists whose vehicles have become inoperable to those incidents requiring in-depth crash and criminal investigations. Despite not being statutorily required, the Pennsylvania State Police has always taken the responsibility of coordinating towing services very seriously, as it is critical to the restoration of the flow of traffic and the protection of the motoring public and their property. To accomplish this, we have crafted complex and comprehensive internal policies. These policies involve such things as inspecting private towing businesses to determine if they have sufficient equipment and facilities, accounting for the injured motorist's belongings and ensuring their safe storage, attempting to keep motorists from being charged exorbitant rates, as well as maintaining background standards for those who are given this critical public safety task. In an attempt to be fair to the towing industry, the PSP has gone to great lengths to construct protocols that attempt to achieve equality in how calls for services are distributed, as well as internal regulations that attempt to apply these standards consistently as not to create an unfair business advantage among competitors. We believe these common sense measures have aided in the safety of the motoring public and have been very beneficial to the towing industry. Over the years, we have developed many positive business partnerships with towing service providers, and our experience shows most towers to be highly professional. But the system is simply not sustainable. Adhering to these complex protocols during emergency dispatch and response has always been at the cost of efficiency. Further, we invest significant administrative resources into the process only to be highly vulnerable to litigation and criticism of partiality. Related lawsuits have resulted in millions of dollars lost to the taxpayers. Instead of resources being spent on our primary law enforcement function, they are frequently spent conducting conflict resolution between motorists and towers and time-consuming internal investigations, much for the purpose of consumer protection. Some even result in discipline to our own members, whose primary function and training is emergency response, not business management or resolution of civil disputes. The PSP is a unique organization in that it has primary jurisdiction in parts of every county in the Commonwealth. Some of our patrol zones on interstate highways span several counties. Thus, we rely heavily on county emergency management services and communication centers. Because of this relationship, we have considered the prospect of utilizing county resources for towing management. However, we recognize that adding the responsibility of all of the aforementioned administrative requirements of inspection, conflict dispute, litigation, and dispatching would be a significant increase in their operational workload and fiscal liability. Further, actually requiring them to take on all of these tasks in a uniform manner across the entire state would surely require comprehensive legislation. Given these challenges, the Pennsylvania State Police has undertaken an initiative to evaluate the feasibility of establishing a no-cost contract with a third-party administrator to manage the process for the PSP. The private entity is responsible for establishing and maintaining a list of authorized towing service providers, ensuring compliance with professional standards, dispatching towers to the scene of highway incidents, and resolving disputes. Those providers who are interested in participating pay a maximum of $35 per call to the administrator for these services. Providers may absorb this cost or pass it on to the motorist. Importantly, those motorists who request a towing provider of their choice are unaffected by this system, provided their request is in conformance with current law. Also, this does not affect towing requests to municipal police departments. The pilot program was intentionally started in the challenging terrain of northwest Pennsylvania beginning in December of 2013. While initially focused on a small area, it now encompasses 8 stations spread over 2 troops and involves the participation of 43, I have a typo here in my testimony, 43 towing service providers. We have worked with individual business owners, industry-wide representatives, our volunteer emergency service partners, and legislators to gather feedback and make changes where necessary. Although the project has not been a seamless transition in the affected areas, it has shown very promising results. We are very optimistic about its future success, and we continue to incorporate lessons learned along the way, particularly as they relate to safety. Our department has taken on a significant number of statutorily related initiatives and administrative duties over the last several decades. Many of these are well suited to our organizational structure, but our finite fiscal and administrative resources need to be efficiently utilized. The Pennsylvania State Police has long been considered one of the most progressive law enforcement agencies in the nation. Consistently, this pilot is designed to determine if we can leverage competitive private sector resources to manage a public sector need in a cost-effective manner. In other words, let business manage business. But most importantly, this initiative is designed to allow us to remain focused on our core function, to provide the highest quality law enforcement and public safety services possible for the citizens of Pennsylvania. I thank you for your attention, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have on this pilot program. Thank you.
I would first ask the chairman if they have any questions. Representative Stevens.
Colonel Bivens, can you tell us how many towers have signed up with auto return, and do you feel there's adequate coverage in that northwest area with the towers who have signed on to cover the area, both towers, EMS, and fire?
Well, sir, we have a total of 43 towers, I'm told, that have signed on at this point and are being used in that 8-station area. I do believe that we have adequate coverage in that area. One of the decisions that we made was that we would not roll out this service or initiate this service in any particular area until we were confident that we had adequate coverage and that responses would be made in a timely manner.
And in your testimony, you indicated that your coverage, the state police coverage, it's primarily on state highways, I would assume interstate highways, state roads, and so forth. Local dispatch is done through local municipalities or 911 centers. Is that what I understood you to testify?
I gave the example of interstate highways, but we have primary jurisdiction over many, many highways, anything from dirt roads on up through interstate highways, depending on where they're located, if they're in a municipality that we have primary jurisdiction for.
Can you talk for a minute about how that dispatching works in terms of how a call comes to the state police? whether through a direct call or whether through a 911 center, how that call comes, and then how the process works from there?
Well, typically in the case of the necessity for a tow, we would have a trooper on scene, and the trooper would request the tow. The trooper would contact the dispatcher at the state police station. The dispatcher would then proceed through one of two mechanisms. One is an online process that's very simple for a civilian dispatcher to enter the basic information that's required into the system, and a tow is dispatched, in this case by auto return. Or they can pick up a phone, and there's a phone number that they can call and have the dispatch of that towing service done that way.
Thank you, Colonel. Mr. Chairman, I have other questions, but I'll let other members.
Great, thank you. Chairman Marsico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Stevenson touched on some of the questions I had, but I wanted just to follow up on that dispatch. Now, you go to, they call 911, right? You said the state trooper would then would call the dispatcher.
The state police dispatcher at our station.
Yeah. Is the county emergency 911 involved in this process at all?
No, sir.
Can they be?
There would be
or should they be?
The way it works now, there would be no reason for them to be. It would be an extra step in the process.
So if there was an emergency at the crash, are they contacted at all, or is just you guys then,
certainly
state troopers then call the EMTs, etc.?
No, the 911 center would certainly be involved in the dispatch of EMS and fire department if they're needed.
If there's injuries, etc.,
yes,
they would be called. But is it feasible? Does it make sense to call them and let them do the dispatch to the towing operators, etc.?
You know,
I'm just asking questions. I'm not quite sure.
Anyone can do the dispatch. Who does the dispatch isn't the issue to us.
Right.
The issue is all of the other things that on the front end that I talked about briefly, and I can go into greater detail if you like, but there's a lot of work that goes into, first of all, qualifying the tower for service, inspecting the premises, doing background checks on those towers, and mapping their location so that the dispatchers can identify the nearest available and that kind of thing. And so once all of these other steps are in place, we collect the fee structure, for example, from that tower, and all of that's put in place. Now the dispatch occurs. The dispatch is one very small piece of a much larger issue for us. After that tow occurs, the other issue that we get involved with is conflict resolution, because we have individuals who are not satisfied at times. And again, the vast majority of the towers, I want to be very clear, the vast majority of the towers are very professional, and we don't get complaints. But there is a significant percentage that we do get complaints on, and then we're required to follow up and try and mediate those complaints. We work with the individual, we work with their insurance company, we work with the towers to try and come to some resolution. In other cases, the complaints are between towers. One tower feels that they should have gotten the tow versus a different tow. So that ties up our people, spending time mediating that and resolving it for the future. And there are a myriad of other issues that we get into that ultimately at times lead to litigation that, again, cost the taxpayers, because we're now incurring legal fees and ultimately, at times, paying out civil awards over the way that whole process has been structured and the way those tows occurred.
I guess the question is, though, can the 911 folks at the county level, can they do the job that the company is doing, that was contracted?
They could do one small piece of what the company does. Again, this company is contracted to do all of those other steps. So it should not be a trooper involved in mediation of those issues. It should not be a trooper inspecting the station to begin with. All of that would be done by auto return. The phone call itself is not the issue. I can have a PCO, a police communications operator from the state police, make the call, or I can have a 911 dispatcher make the call. That's not the issue for us. Or I can have auto return make the call. The issue for us is all of the other work on either end of that process that creates administrative work for all of our people and takes troopers off the road significant amounts of time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I just jump in here? I know Chairman Sonata has a question. You talked about the issue of conflict resolution. 2 years ago, we passed House Bill 110 of 2012, which basically gives the conflict resolution authority now to the Office of the Attorney General in their Office of Consumer Affairs, doesn't it?
It gives them the ability to enforce that one small act. That act doesn't even begin to address the issue. That act just, it was a step in the right direction, but doesn't begin to go nearly as far as even our own internal policies on establishing who can be a tower for the state police and how some of the issues are resolved. It basically gives an individual the right to have access to their vehicle. It says that the rates have to be posted, and essentially...
but that's all addressed in Act 110.
Again, that one small piece. None of the rest of what I described to you is addressed in that act.
How many complaints have you sent to the Office of Consumer Affairs and the Attorney General's office since its passage?
I don't know how many we've sent. We've handled quite a few in that interim because, again, it reflects on the state police. So if we called the tower and the motorist calls us, we will attempt to resolve that. If the motorist is still dissatisfied, they can certainly call the Attorney General's office and file a complaint. But again, many of the things that they would complain about are not covered by that act, and the Attorney General has no ability to enforce anything that's not covered by that act.
I disagree with you, but Chairman Sonato. And that's not the time for the
Colonel,
debate.
I have a quick question. Are these all Pennsylvania companies?
No, sir, they're not.
What is the breakdown? I know we're on the border there in western Pennsylvania.
In terms of towing companies?
Yes.
I really don't have that information, sir. We could certainly get that. But what I would tell you is that long before we used auto return, we were also using out-of-state companies for tows in the border areas of Pennsylvania. So nothing has changed there.
Are they registered in Pennsylvania, though, the out-of-state? And they would meet all the rules and regulations?
Yes, that is a requirement for them to do those tows.
Okay, because I know I would just heard that they were not, and that's why I want to ask that. You're saying that they are registered in Pennsylvania?
That is my understanding, sir.
Well, wouldn't it take them longer to have to service the needs? I mean, if you're in Grove City, that's 25 miles from the state line.
Well, sir, and I wouldn't expect that we would be bringing an out-of-state tower great distances into Pennsylvania. I would expect that they would be given tows when they happen to be the closest service, closer than any Pennsylvania tower, and they can assist in getting that roadway opened up.
All right. Thank you, Colonel.
Let me see. Let's start down at this table with the legislators down here. Representative Hackett for a question.
There we go. We got it now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to ask a question. But it's more going to have to be a statement today. I hope you don't mind, just to get things off and running. A little bit of background. I'm 26 years law enforcement and have a pretty good knowledge of all aspects of law enforcement throughout this Commonwealth and actually through the nation through my background. So I just want to be clear here. I do think it's unfair here at today's hearing that we have these three gentlemen, lieutenant, captain, and major, sitting in front of us when I truly believe, and if they're not here today, that General Counsel for PSP should be here to answer some of these questions and not hide behind these fine men in uniform. That's my statement. That's what I'm upset about, and I guess you can see that in my voice. Second thing is, I don't think the Pennsylvania State Police should be in the towing business. I'll come out and say that for you guys, okay? You need to be back in the business of locking up the bad guys, which what you do best, okay? And we want to put your funds there. I think that's where we're at. I think the local towing issues that apply should be within those municipalities in which they occur. But we can't get there. And Chairman Marsico and Dick, you asked great questions. And I think what you were trying to get at was, how does the system work? Someone calls 911. It goes to our county 911 centers. They need a tow truck. From there, that call says, hold on, you're in state police territory. By the way, this happens with crimes in progress, too. They hit that hold on button, they transfer the call to the Pennsylvania State Police local dispatch. For where I live, it would be media. A trooper or an employee, civilian employee, would answer that phone and say, how can we help you? I'm getting beat up at such and such a location. Now the person told the story twice. Now Pennsylvania State Police dispatch their trooper to that location, whether it's a tow or if it's a crime of violence in progress. There's a delay here. There's a safety issue. Then what happens is that trooper then travels through 3 municipalities would have all police officers working in those municipalities that don't even hear that dispatch call where the Pennsylvania State Police have dispatched their officer or their trooper. Okay? That's the basis of the problem. That then can help us address this towing issue that we have if we leave it back in the local hands. If an incident happens in a community that the Pennsylvania State Police patrol, the 911 should have at hand who that contracted tower is and call the tower for the state police. We mentioned common sense in a lot of your statements there, Lieutenant. I'm hoping through this hearing we can move forward and start putting some things into action. And I feel sorry for these 3 guys up here because it's not them that are making those rules and all. It is General Counsel, and they need to come out and they need to talk to us in front as a committee. Thank you for your service, guys.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else at that table? Questions? In the front row here. Representative Ciccone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you put this contract out for bid, how many companies responded?
There were 3, sir.
And were any of them from Pennsylvania?
No, they were not.
All were out-of-state companies. Are there Pennsylvania providers for this service available?
I'm not aware of any specific companies that provide, companies that provide this specific service. Are you aware?
No, we're not aware, to our knowledge, of any Pennsylvania firms that provide this type of service.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Jim Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions, but I'll limit it at the beginning just to the statement that you made about the front-end costs. The initial, I guess the initial information I got was that the company, Auto Return is the name, was hired to dispatch these calls, but you're saying that there's more to it.
Yes, sir.
So they not only they dispatch the calls, but they're going to do the background checks?
They're going to do all of the other physical checks of the location. We would still do just the background check for criminal history on the towers. Everything else would be conducted by Auto Return.
Well, I can see that you're already doing thousands of volunteer coach background checks, so I would think that background checks for towing industries wouldn't be that onerous, so that's good to hear. The physical check, is it like an inspection? Like what would that involve?
It's an inspection of the premises. It's also checking everything from ensuring that the tower has proper and adequate liability insurance. The background is a part of it, looking at the equipment to make sure that the equipment is up to standards, that so if they claim to be a heavy-duty towing service or a medium towing or a light-duty towing, that they have the appropriate equipment to do all of that, that their location is where it's claimed to be, that the rates are posted, and there's a whole list of things that they would do as part of that inspection, and then sign that tower up and, again, map them into their dispatch tool, and I believe you'll hear more about that when they testify, how they go about then selecting the tower for a dispatch based on all of that information.
So previously you would use troopers for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I have right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel, thank you for your service. Gentlemen, it would be well if all this could be resolved amicably. I don't know if that's possible or not, but flash forward, if you would, explain to me how engaging a company from 3,000 miles away to do dispatching is going to make the dispatcher currently working for the Pennsylvania State Police life any different, and in particular with the conflict resolution issue that you brought up.
Well, sir, first of all, in terms of having this end amicably, I hope you're right as well. We have a very good relationship with the towers, and I do hope to maintain that regardless of how this project proceeds. In terms of the conflict resolution, that's separate from the dispatch portion of this. So the conflict resolution is after the tow has occurred. The dispatcher is not involved with that. In this case, auto return would be. If auto return isn't, then a trooper is involved with that. And again, we're taking the trooper's time away from other law enforcement duties to get the complaint from whoever it is. And again, in some cases, it's another tower, or it may be a motorist, or it may be their insurance carrier, and they get that information, they go to the tower, they try to resolve this, determine whether there's any merit to the complaint. If there is, there's action that may have to be taken. If it doesn't appear that there is, and again, try and mediate a resolution. Either way, it's very time-consuming for that trooper. At a minimum, it's a shift off of the road for a trooper that could be otherwise doing law enforcement functions.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Rapp? Oh, go ahead. I forgot.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I just have a question. If you could clarify the fee. From what I understand, the providers who are interested in participating pay a maximum of $35 per call to the administrator for the services. But then I'm reading from a letter that was written that the third-party dispatch will require the tow responders to collect a $22.50 administrative fee from the local motorist for each dispatch. And then that dispatch will be an automated dispatch from California. Is that correct? So that they're paying a $35 fee, but they're collecting the $22.50 from the motorist?
No, ma'am, I think I can clarify that. When I say a $35 fee, that's the maximum fee, and that's what auto return under contract would allow that tower to collect from a motorist. The tower remits $22.50 to auto return for their service. The remainder of that money, I'm told, may be retained by the tower or not charged at all by the tower up front. But if it is charged by the tower, it is retained by the tower. Auto return has, and I don't want to speak for them, I would let them explain this formula to you, but auto return has determined that there will be a certain percentage of tows where the tower does not get full reimbursement or maybe any reimbursement. And so there's a piece, the difference between the $22.50 and the $35 that they're allowed to retain to put toward that percentage of non-reimbursed towing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few more follow-up questions, if I can, Colonel. In my earlier question, I asked about the number of towers, and you said 43. Have there also been adequate responses from EMS services and from fire companies in the region of the pilot program to service the needs of any emergencies there?
I'm not aware of any issues with the responses from EMS or fire department, but again, that's not something that's included in this pilot project. Nothing has changed with our relationship with those folks.
The pilot program itself, it is a pilot. What is the term of the pilot, and what is the evaluation process that you're going through to determine whether or not to broaden this program to the rest of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Well, sir, the pilot was determined to be contained within a two-troop area, troops D and E, so Butler and Erie troops in the northwestern portion of the state. We've just recently deployed the auto return model in much of Troop D's area, so there's not been adequate time yet to evaluate that. We have not put a firm time limit on when that evaluation will occur because there have been delays in the rollout of the pilot. And what I would say to you is that, again, because it's a pilot, there are mistakes that are being made along the way, and we're trying to learn from those mistakes. And so there were mistakes in the rollout in Erie Troop. We acknowledge those. There were mistakes on the part of the state police. There were mistakes on the part of auto return. We've tried to learn from those and do a better job as we roll it out into Butler. And we want to ensure that we can address all of the concerns of the towers, the emergency responders, the citizens, before we would expand that or consider expanding it any further. If we can't address all of those concerns, we would not expand it any further, and we would end the pilot. I will tell you that with what I've seen so far, it has generally been very positive. There have been some issues, We're trying to deal with those issues. I wish we could go back in time and take away some of the mistakes that were made early on. We can't do that, obviously, but I want to make sure that before we go any further, if we go any further, that we don't repeat those mistakes.
Can you address what some of those adjustments or corrections are that you've made?
Well, as an example, and Representative Barrar alluded to it earlier about some of the meetings, we did meet with some individual towers. We did not, when we ruled this out in the Erie Troop, we did not have a general meeting, if you will, something that was open to anybody that wanted to attend. That was a mistake. We should have, and we have done that in Butler before we ruled anything out in Troop D's area. That was one of the things that we learned from. There have been some other issues that have been brought to our attention, concerns about the length of the contract that Auto Return was presenting to the towers and some of the clauses within that contract. There were concerns about some of the tactics that were alleged to have been used by representatives of Auto Return in dealing with some of the towers. I have personally spoken with the CEO of Auto Return, and we both agree that some of those things should not have occurred. I'm not sure if all of them did occur, but either way, that's not how either of us wants business to be conducted. Again, we think that there are a lot of good towers, a lot of good small businessmen out there that we need to deal with on a professional level and try to come to some amicable agreement of how to proceed here.
Thank you again, Colonel. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I just do a follow-up to one of Dick's question about how you plan to make the final determination on the pilot program to see if it's working or not? Will you assemble some type of a panel to discuss this? Is that how you would, and go through the information and data that you've received?
Yes, sir.
Would you consider then reaching out to the Towing Association and the first responders? The first responders from these areas have sent us numerous petitions complaining about this new system and the delay in response time. I mean, I really think if you're going to make a determination, you should have them as part of your panel or board that would make that assessment from the Towing Association and also then from the first responders to see what get their input of how the system is working, and I hope you would take that into consideration when you make your final determination on this.
Well, Representative, I agree with you, and I think we should have that dialogue with them. We have seen many of those complaints that you're referring to, and in some cases there are some legitimate concerns. In other cases, quite honestly, there's been a bit of hysteria created here as well, and so what we've also seen are complaints that have been filed indicating that because of Auto Return there was a delayed response. Well, interestingly enough, the complaint was filed in an area where we've not even deployed Auto Return, and it's still being done by normal dispatch procedures. So there may have been a delay, but it wasn't related to this pilot program. The nice thing that we have seen from Auto Return is that there is an ability to track the dispatch time, the response time, the time on scene, and all of that can be graphed and provided to us so that we can evaluate where we have issues with delayed response. Prior to having that software in place in these areas where the pilot has been initiated, we have no ability to do that. So we're left to then go back and address anecdotally those complaints and hopefully through our people at the station level or the troop level identify issues. Here we have firm data that we can look at when we're dealing with the Auto Return areas.
Thank you. Representative Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in. I too agree with my colleague, Representative Hackett, that you guys shouldn't be here. It should be your counsel. There's no person that has more respect for the Pennsylvania State Police than I do. As a former law enforcement officer and chief of police, Colonel, I respectfully disagree with the dispatch being a minor part of this. You and the two gentlemen next to you, as well as I, started out standing on a highway on a rainy day or a snowy day with an accident, closing a complete lane, bringing people down the southbound lane of a northbound travel thing, and all you need is one rogue to get on the brim and ride up, and we're bringing tow trucks, we're bringing public safety personnel down to the accident scene, and we have no way of immediately contacting them. I too agree that I think the dispatch should be in the hands of the local 911 centers. I know you're saying, well, you know, it's a cost factor, it's this, it's the added burden, but I think you need that instant communications to avoid what could be a catastrophe in this, you know, and I'm hearing all kind of things. I've talked to people who have signed up with auto return, and I know if I have a tow shop somewhere and I'm getting ready to set up business, state police comes out, they make sure I got all my I's dotted, my T's crossed, and then I'm permitted to open. Now, it's my understanding that auto return, there's a 90-day grace period for me to set up my yard, for me to do the fence. Why is that? The Pennsylvania State Police wouldn't let me start until that was all done, until my T's were crossed, my I's were dotted. I don't understand that. And are the requirements that the PSP had, are they the same requirements that auto return is putting on these towers? Obviously not, if that's the case. And who's watching auto return in this? And who's going to watch them if this pilot program turns into a statewide thing?
Let me address a couple of things. First of all, the requirements, if not identical, and Captain Brinkley could address that, if not identical, they're very similar. In terms of that grace period, while there is a grace period, they can sign up, they cannot begin receiving dispatches for tows until they have complied with all of those rules. So, for example, the secure storage area, they can't take any tows until they have that in place. So they have to be in compliance before any of that occurs. The point that you made about the dispatch, your point's well taken. By my remarks, I don't mean that it's not important that dispatch is done properly and timely and everything else. What my point was that in terms of the time consumption, the amount of resource consumption from the Pennsylvania State Police, the dispatch is minor in terms of that resource consumption compared to all of the other steps in this process that were required either on the front end or the back end to deal with.
Well, you said that you're going to look at considerable cost savings to the PSP, correct? By taking this to a private entity. I mean, how many troopers do we have tied up doing this right now in the other areas outside of the pilot area? And what do you anticipate your cost savings to be? Because if the PSP is going to save money, then we have to look at our ability to use that money either in the general budget or something, or putting more troopers in the academy class. If you're going to put troopers back on the road, as you say, do you have any idea how much you anticipate on saving by going to a private firm to handle this?
The cost savings, sir, is more on the litigation side. As far as the troopers, it's time saving. And so it allows those troopers, typically the troopers that are doing these investigations are our vehicle fraud investigators, so they can be doing other types of vehicle fraud investigations, or they can be doing investigations of complaints against towers. And so it really comes down to how much of the other work do we have them do, and in some cases, how much of a criminal investigator's time do we take away from, whether it's drug investigations, gun violence investigations, whatever the case might be, to allocate that they take a day and go handle this complaint that we've got from a motorist about one of the towers, or again, from one tower against another tower, whatever the case might be.
Okay, so we're not really saving dollars, we're just saving time.
Dollars we are saving, sir, with the litigation.
Right, that's what I mean.
We do incur significant costs. That varies from year to year. But we've had some years where we've paid out over $1 million. We've had other years where we've paid out far less than that. But we do incur costs almost every year because of litigation. We're successful in some of that litigation, but we incur significant legal costs in fighting it.
Okay, thank you, Colonel. It's always good to see you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Scone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to be clear in my own mind. So if for example, auto return didn't do this and the 911s began dispatching, who would then still take care of the inspections of the towers, and who would take care of the conflict resolutions? Would the county then have to assume the responsibility for all those other?
Yes, sir. If the county didn't, then the state police would be no further ahead than we are right now. We would be still doing all of that. We would still be the entity being sued when someone disagrees with a decision that we've made. And so if the 911 centers were to take on this function, all of that, in my opinion, should go along with it. But now the counties are assuming that liability, and they're assuming all of that work to qualify those towers and to mediate those complaints.
So ultimately, the taxpayer is still on the hook for those expenses,
Yes,
as
sir.
opposed to having it sourced out to a private company. That,
Yes, sir, and get rid of that liability from the taxpayer.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
When, when lawsuits are paid out, does that come directly from your budget?
Depends on the amount of the lawsuit, sir. Certain awards are capped. We pay into a fund, as all state agencies do. Up to a certain award, it's paid out of that fund. But when it exceeds an amount, then the state police is required to pick that up out of our budget.
Okay, thank you. Representative Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel, on follow-up on Representative Saccone, the litigation that you're involved in, do you believe that it's primarily due to the dispatch and then not the other front-end costs of this program to you?
It's not primarily the dispatch. The dispatch kind of precipitates the issue at times. So in other words, if you have one tower who believes he's not getting or she is not getting a tow job that they should have and someone else gets it, then that dispatch could lead to the litigation. However, in most cases, where the litigation comes from is the complaints that come in and any effort on the part of PSP to sanction any tower, remove them from a tow list or take any other sanction, almost invariably leads to litigation. And I understand that. It's a loss of revenue for that tower, but we have no other means to deal with that other than to suspend them if that's warranted for infractions of the rules that we put in place as part of the agreement that we have with that tower. The rules, if you read them, seem to be fairly common sense, but when you get the attorneys involved determining all the nuances of those, you can imagine where this goes.
Well, thank you. I'm not an attorney, but I would think that anyone involved in a scene might be brought into court or into some form of liability, whether they're dispatching. So I would think that the trooper on scene might be just as involved as in the dispatch. But we'll say that the liability, if you did go with AR or some other company, then you would think that you would have less litigation because they're choosing the towers.
Yes, sir.
So then they would then have some liability in this. So in that case, then they might be going to court over these issues. Would that be correct, or would you?
Sir, I'm also not an attorney, but I think that's very possible. Yes, sir.
Okay, so then we would expect to see them in court over these issues. They wouldn't have any clause or any indemnity in their contracts that they wouldn't be liable for any of these.
Again, I would ask Auto Return to address the specifics of the contract. I do believe there's some indemnification. I don't think that necessarily takes care of all liability. And as I understand it, there's an arbitration clause in there, too, to deal with some of the disputes. With that said, an attorney would have to tell you how binding that is and what other liability there is for them.
Thank you, Colonel. And I would say that I would think that all of us have the greatest respect for PSP and your troopers and your administration, and this is basically information gathering.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your service.
In your request for proposals, I think one of the main reasons you did cite was the fact that you are sued by, I guess, towers. Oh, you're not sued by consumers in this. You're mostly sued by towers. Are they the type of suits you're talking about? What is the reason for their filing lawsuits against you?
There are a variety of lawsuits that have occurred, but some of the larger ones have been because they were removed from a towing list and their services were not being utilized by PSP.
And I know myself, I've complained about the lack of clarity and the fact that every barracks commander tends to enforce, what is it, field regulation, is it 6-2?
Yes, sir.
That they come under? Okay, I had a barracks commander tell me that, in his barracks, basically he said to me, he said, I'm God in this barracks and I'll interpret the regulations the way I choose to. And I think that's the primary reason that you're sued, because every barracks commander seems to be free to interpret the regulations to their ability. And I know myself, just from where I live in Delaware County, that has been a point of contention with many, many towers, the lack of clarity. And consistency in the enforcement of the regulation. And it's one of the things I know we need to clean up that I've actually had a meeting with the commissioner about. So.
And, sir, that would surprise me that one of the station commanders would make that statement, but just for clarification, the station commander in the end cannot make that decision. It goes to the troop commander, who's got a much broader, there are 15 troops, county troops across the Commonwealth, so it goes to that individual. We have also implemented a requirement that the troop commander coordinate with the Office of Chief Counsel in an attempt to make sure that there is consistency in the way those rules are applied across the Commonwealth.
I think in 2008 there was, I don't have that memo in front of me, it was sent to me from your chief counsel, basically giving the department directions on how to not be sued issues. And I read that memo. I'm hoping to have, did we get copies of that for everyone? That was the one we asked for 40. Luann, did you get that copy of that memo from the chief counsel? Okay. I have to try to find that. I apologize.
And I'm not familiar with that memo, sir, but I will tell you there's a different administration in place, different chief counsel, and so regardless, I'm not familiar with it, but regardless of what was in that memo, I can tell you that the process has been amended in the interim.
Thank you. Representative Gillen.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your distinguished service. My wife had the misfortune not long ago of being in an accident, but had the good fortune of being in one of your coverage areas, so thank you for aiding her and your distinguished service. I had mentioned in your testimony there were mistakes that were made. Was not a seamless transition going to auto return company, and in fact you even mentioned some tactics of the company, and you spoke directly, as I recall your testimony, with one of the leaders of that company. Could you just walk us back in time with regard to the vetting process that this company went through, how they were chosen, and the decision-making process that evolved to the point where they were selected?
I'm going to ask Captain Brinkley to talk a little bit about that.
The process actually started back in 2011, and as we worked our way through, evaluating the various options that we had available with respect to handling towing services, the concept of using a third-party vendor became the most viable option from our perspective, the most beneficial option from our perspective. We identified a number of companies throughout the United States that provide this type of service and put out a request for proposals on the PSP website. We were in contact with DGS prior to that RFP going out. It did not go through the normal DGS process based on their advice, which was it didn't have to go through the normal DGS vetting process. We posted it on our webpage, the PSP website, because it was a no-cost contract. There was no cost to the Commonwealth in getting this stood up. The responses to the request for proposals, we had 3 different companies that responded to those requests, Auto Return being one of those. Based on a scoring matrix that we put together, we scored those proposals, and Auto Return was the selected vendor that we thought would best meet not only our needs, but the needs of the towing service providers and the emergency service provider community at large with respect to the services that they were able to provide. So that was basically the process that we went through to identify Auto Return as being the preferred company, at least for the pilot.
With regard to the vetting specifically, did you look at the companies or this particular company, Auto Return, with regard to changes in the litigative environment that occurred as a consequence of them taking contracts, tactics specifically with regard to this company versus other companies? What sort of investigation occurred given the fact that they have significant purview over what is happening in Pennsylvania in an emergency environment?
Right. We looked at the company's overall history in providing these types of services, reached out to other agencies, entities that were currently using the companies that submitted requests for proposals to get feedback from those entities on the company's performance before making a decision on which of the 3 that submitted proposals we were going to go with for the pilot. So it did go through a rather extensive vetting process of ensuring that the company that we brought in was going to meet our standards.
What role did towers have in this exhaustive process with regard to their input and their feedback?
Well, that was one of the areas that admittedly, and Colonel Bivens touched upon this earlier, that early on in the process, the outreach to the towing community was rather limited. Prior to rolling out the pilot initiative in Troop E, Auto Return did reach out to a small group of towers in that area to let them know what was happening, what was coming. But we did do some other outreach with respect to other entities. The pilot was initiated in December of 2013. In 2011, we had talked a little bit earlier about the vetting process that we were going through. There was outreach at that point to legislative members, the Insurance Federation of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania's Towers Association, a number of entities, to let them know that we were looking at different options for handling this in a different fashion, getting the PSP out of the towing business. Prior to launching the pilot in December of 2013, in August there was an extensive legislative outreach initiative that was undertaken by our Legislative Affairs Office. They contacted, it was a total of over 40 different legislative contacts to let them know what we were doing, that we'd be launching this pilot in December of 2013. And a number of those contacts were made in person. In November, about a month prior to launching the pilot, we sent out a number of outreach letters to all of the Troop E tow operators that we had been doing business with up until that point to let them know that the pilot would be rolling out in December. And on December 3rd, we rolled out the pilot in Troop E. Prior to the rollout in Troop D, recognizing, that mistake had been made with respect to the limited outreach to the towers prior to rolling out the Troop E pilot, we hosted an informational session at Butler County Community College in January of this year, prior to the rollout in the Butler area. We invited in any and all towers. It was publicized heavily. It was their opportunity to come in to hear about the program, hear about how it would impact them, and let them ask questions and address some of their concerns. We also invited folks in from the emergency services community, volunteer fire companies, EMS providers, to voice their concerns as well and hear a little bit about the program. So that was one of the improvements that we made moving forward, that we were a little limited on the outreach in Troop E, but it was much more extensive once we rolled into the Troop D area prior to implementing the pilot there.
Thank you for that testimony. And finally, Colonel, with regard to the tactics that were employed, could you amplify a little bit, perhaps give us a little window inside that conversation you had with the company, Auto Return? Were there any surprises, any conclusions that you drew on after that conversation?
Some of the, some of the concerns that were brought to my attention were things like voicemails that had been left or messages that had been delivered to individual towers telling them that one of the other towers in their area was signing up and you'd better sign up as well, or you won't get the business, they're going to take it all. And there were variations of those kinds of complaints. I will tell you that it was not something that I was hearing was widespread, but even one of those complaints, if true, should not have occurred. And so, and there were probably a few other things out there as well, but those were probably some of the more egregious, and that was the reason for my discussion with Auto Return, to ensure that we would not have anything like that, that there should be truthful information conveyed to the towers. We needed to establish a relationship, not intimidate towers into participating. And again, I will tell you that the leadership of Auto Return was in complete agreement. I got no pushback on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other questions from the member? Okay.
Sorry, Chairman. Thank you for indulging me with a third question. So could you tell me, when you have these contracts with the third party like this, there's always a concern that it opens up charges of favoritism and other minor forms of corruption, or the perception of corruption. So what are some of the methods you employed to preclude this from happening in the contract? Have you had to deal with this so that all towers are treated fairly?
To this point, all towers that wanted to sign up have been permitted to sign up as long as they meet the minimum standards. So I'm not aware of any allegations of favoritism to this point. I do know that Auto Return mentioned to us that there were a couple of issues brought to their attention where they have two towers in close proximity to one another. And so, for example, one of them, because of the algorithms in their dispatch program, was getting the majority of the dispatches. They're working to more evenly distribute that business between two towers that are in roughly the same spot. But I'm not aware of any other issues. Now, the issue of favoritism has come up, and again, that feeds into the whole litigation issue in the past, where there have been allegations that a trooper specifically requested a certain towing service, and then there are allegations made about why the trooper may have requested that specific towing service. And then we get into another whole internal investigation to try and determine the merits of the complaint. If warranted, we take discipline, and you see how this snowballs on, and then we still have the civil side to deal with in that particular type of a complaint.
Thank you very much.
Representative Rapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel, you've mentioned that you have 43 towers on your list. Have there been towers that have been dropped from your list from the area, D&E?
I'm not aware of any, but that might be a question better directed to Auto Return, as they're maintaining that list, ma'am.
So they maintain the list. So you're not aware at this point in time. The meeting in Butler, was that well attended in the area?
Yes, very well attended.
Very well attended, okay. And I see that you did have a meeting in Warren County as well. Was that well attended?
That was actually hosted by, I believe, one of the volunteer fire departments up in that area. From what I understand, that was fairly well attended also.
Okay. And how would I get the information regarding whether or not Auto Return has dropped towers from the list?
They'll be testifying immediately after us, and the CEO will be here, as I understand. So.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Representative Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Colonel, I'm sorry. I maybe missed I asked you a barrage of questions. This is worse than budget time, isn't it? But anyway, the one question I had is basically, who is going to monitor Auto Return if indeed they wind up getting a contract and we go statewide? Who's going to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? They're inspecting these places, and the inspections aren't slighted one way or another. Not to say that they would, but checks and balances, trust but verify. Do we have any idea who's going to be doing that?
Yes, sir. That'll fall to Major Hoke's shop under Bureau of Patrol, and they would be responsible for any future rollout beyond the pilot program and then maintaining the program as it would go forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Representative Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to your timeline, 2011, you said the process started, and a number of legislators may have been contacted. I'm not sure who, but earlier in your testimony, you mentioned that you didn't believe that this was really a venue really that the General Assembly would be involved in any way, that the PSP would make this decision.
Well, sir, I believe what I alluded to was that if we were going to move to the 911 centers, taking on all of this responsibility, that the legislature would have had to get involved to put legislation in place to standardize it statewide. I think that's the only place I mentioned the legislature. But in terms of the outreach, yes, in fact, we could certainly supply you with a list of contacts that were made with the legislature. I believe quite a few people in leadership in affected committees, as well as a number of all of the representatives and senators from the areas where the pilot project has been initiated.
And was the governor's office involved or included?
Colonel, can I ask you 1 second to pull the microphone a little closer to you? Some people have said they can't hear. Thank you.
I can actually answer that question. Yes, we did have a meeting with the governor's policy office in August of 2013, several months prior to the initial pilot rollout.
But 2 years after the process started?
No. The meeting with the governor's policy office was in August of 2013. The pilot rolled out in December of 2013.
But earlier in your testimony, did you say that the process started in 2011, or did I misunderstand you?
Correct. In 2011, we started evaluating various options for towing services, the administration of emergency towing services for the PSP. That evaluation process began in 2011.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Colonel, I have a question for you. In the contract, it does the contract between AR, auto return, and the towers. It does have a section there that deals with the salvers. Are you aware of this? The salvers' requirements and duties is written in state law. Okay, yes. They are protected. Their job title is protected. Does the auto return contract in any way alter or change the relationship that the salvers have with the state police at this time?
No, it does nothing to supersede state law, so all of that would still apply. It's only if the salver is involved in towing operations, then they would participate through auto return.
Okay. Currently, the Pennsylvania State Police, with your field regulation, you do not have the authority to establish any type of a fee or pricing schedule over the towers. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. But in your request for a proposal, you basically asked the auto return then to establish a clear and uniformed rate structure. Is that not a conflict in the law and what that you're giving auto return the authority to establish a rate schedule when there's nothing in the law that gives you the authority to do that?
No, sir, I don't see a conflict there, and we're not establishing a rate schedule. We establish caps, and the way that was done was that there is a requirement that the fee schedules for the various towing services be provided to us. We simply took those fee schedules for a regional area, averaged those, and then in fact added to that and set that as the maximum amount that could be towed for those specific services. There are many exceptions to those published services. So, for example, with recovery operations, where the costs can be quite high, there's an ability of towers to go outside of that fee schedule and recover for time and materials, for example, for a major recovery. So it was merely working with the figures already provided by towers in those areas to establish a process whereby a single tower could not charge an exorbitant fee that's far beyond what the other towers in that area charge for the same service.
Okay. Are you aware if there, right now, I understand a lot of the towers that have, your field regulation requires an extremely strict qualification process for a tower to become a state police tower, okay, according to your own regulations. Are you aware if auto return is adhering to the exact same policies that you had enforced in your field regulation 6-2? Is auto return making the new towers coming in, towers that never qualified to be state police towers, now all of a sudden are qualifying to be towers for under the auto return policy at this time? I mean, it's pretty obvious that in the pilot program, a lot of the towers that never could work for you now are working for auto return.
They are being required to meet those standards, sir, and it may not have been that they couldn't work for and take care of PSP tows in the past. They chose not to for whatever reason. And they now have decided that they would like to, and they do have to meet those standards.
Who checks on to make sure that, where's the check and balance done between auto return and the state police to make sure that towers are not being permitted to tow for the state if they did not meet your field regulation requirements? Auto
return is required to verify that they do meet. They have people working in Pennsylvania who are conducting those inspections, and then they are working in close consultation at this point, particularly with Captain Brinkley's shop over in R&D, and to a lesser degree, Major Hoke's shop in Bureau of Patrol, so that we're aware as they acquire additional towing services, they're keeping us abreast of who's joining and any issues that develop.
Thank you. Any of the other members would like to ask questions that I didn't get to? Is there anyone? Gentlemen, I thank you for your testimony. I'm going to ask you if you would consider staying around for the duration of the hearing, because I think when we hear testimony from the towers, from AR, there might be additional questions. Are you okay hanging around for? I know we took you pretty long on this, over an hour.
We're going to stay for as long as we can, sir. I will have several command members of our department who will be here for the entire hearing. I'll stay as long as I can, but I do have other commitments.
I figured that. I was hoping, but if you can identify who would, or if we ask for them, make sure that they would please
Major
jump
Martin
up.
and several
Very
other
familiar,
commanders will
Major. Good. Okay, great. I thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay. We have my script. My slew of papers here. Okay. Where are we? Bivens, Steve, gentlemen. Okay, where's the next? Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Our next testifier is Mr. John Wicker, CEO of Auto Return. Yep. Mr. Wicker, thank you for being here today. If you could introduce your panel of who's with you, and you can begin your testimony at any time.
Okay, thank you. I have to my right Matt Steck, our government affairs consultant, John Pendleton, who's manning the laptop over here, our CTO. We've got Mike Harnish, who's a tow operator in our network, and we have Ken Fisher, also a tow operator in our network. And both these were tow operators for the Pennsylvania State Police prior to the pilot. So I have a statement. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for allotting me the time to come and speak with you today. I am John Wicker, CEO and founder of Auto Return. Though I live in California now, my roots run deep in Pennsylvania. In the 1730s, my forefathers immigrated from Switzerland and settled in Lancaster. My Pennsylvania relatives fought in the Civil War. My grandmother grew up in that house right there, and for those of you on the panel, there's a PowerPoint slide deck that shows this. My grandmother, Dorothy Jackman Momo, grew up there. Momo and my grandfather, Pap, Howard Jackman, both went to Peabody High School. Next slide. He went on to play for Pitt and won the Rose Bowl in 1937. Next. He then joined the Navy and spent World War II on a destroyer in the South Pacific stationed out of Pearl Harbor. Next slide. My mother was born at, Elaine Jackman was born at St. Francis Hospital. My brother David was born at McGee Women's Hospital. My Aunt Donna and Uncle Jeff Jackman still live in Beaver Falls, having spent their careers as school teachers in the Black Hawk District, where Uncle Jeff was also the swim coach. I might have been born in Pennsylvania myself, if it not for the fact that my dad was stationed at Norton Air Force Base when my mom was pregnant with me. We did return to Pennsylvania briefly, but my dad became a federal systems development contractor after leaving the Air Force, and ultimately we settled in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. I went to Virginia Tech, received a computer science degree, and eventually moved to San Francisco at the age of 30 because it's the innovation hub of the world and a top destination for technologists. I live there now with my lovely wife, Natalie, and our young boys, Blake and Jack. By the end of my short time with you today, I'd like you to have a clear understanding of what Auto Return is and what our company is not. To understand our mission, our intentions, and what we stand for. I'd also like for you to firmly grasp what we're doing here in Pennsylvania. Our primary goals are to help the state police and contribute to public safety while saving taxpayer dollars. I hope to dispel any misinformation, to establish the facts, and tell you a bit about how well the pilot program has worked in Erie and elsewhere. I want to begin by giving you a sense of why we started Auto Return and the problems we solve for people. Before Auto Return, I built a career focused on making business more efficient through the application of technology. So after the dot-com crash of 2000, my colleagues and I began looking for an industry where we could make a positive difference using what we had learned. When we found that there was a set of problems in law enforcement towing that is common to all agencies, and that by applying appropriate technology to these problems could make a difference for public safety, efficiency, and fairness for tow operators, Auto Return was born. The problems in law enforcement towing are not with the highly capable local tow operators. I have the greatest respect for them and what they do. Their commitment to public safety and their desire to run a profitable business, as we all should. The problems exist largely because of the manual processes used in the administration and logistics of law enforcement towing. Many of the problems stem from the inefficient voice communications used to execute the majority of routine tow requests. This inefficient process increases the burden on police dispatchers, making them order takers rather than exception handlers with the bandwidth to focus their time and energy on the unusual tows that need special attention. Because the communications are primarily verbal, details of the transactions are rarely kept after the tow is complete, and understanding what happened after the fact becomes nearly impossible. This non-transparent and laborious process can lead to unfair distribution of towing opportunities, increased officer wait times, and decreased public safety. We created Auto Return to streamline the process to increase efficiency, increase public safety, increase the fair distribution of business opportunity, decrease administration surrounding this important agency service, while decreasing cost to the taxpayer. That's what Auto Return is. We are a technology company laser-focused on only one thing: law enforcement towing logistics. That's all we do, logistics. Our primary goals are to minimize tow response times, allowing troopers to return to patrol duties faster, and decrease the administrative burden surrounding the towing program. To be clear, Auto Return is not a towing company. We do not own a single tow truck. We are not in the business of dismantling unclaimed vehicles. We are not a tow operator, and we don't compete with tow operators. Auto Return is also not an auto club. We don't decide to partner with towing companies based on low bid contracts at the expense of service levels. Auto Return stands for safety, efficiency, respect, and fairness. We are the only firm that works with existing tow companies in communities to customize our model to maximize the effectiveness of these important local independent businesses, the tow and impound company operators for law enforcement towing. Our proven processes and tools help our towing partners meet police mandated service levels, and our transparent practices result in higher service levels to the vehicle owner. We've created a comprehensive, open, and transparent system that lets tow companies compete evenly and fairly. Let me give you a sense of how our system works. The Auto Return system receives tow requests from the police electronically, and in some cases verbally. The police dispatcher's job is done at this point. The system then instantaneously allocates the tow request to a police-authorized tow operator according to the rules set by the police. Then the system automatically tracks the job, and assuming the tow progresses normally, no other human is involved in the communication. If the job shows any signs of difficulty, then, and only then, an Auto Return dispatcher calls the tower to provide assistance long before a service issue has occurred. The problems are addressed and the tow gets back on track. The key benefit of the system is that by handling the vast majority of tows automatically, dispatchers have time to address periods of peak demand like during emergencies. Here's an example. Imagine your area of Pennsylvania covered in over 2 feet of snow. Roads need to be cleared. Well, shortly after we went live in Baltimore County, we faced this exact situation. A blizzard, the likes of which are not uncommon in Pennsylvania. On Saturday, June 30th, 2010, with over 2 feet of snow on the ground, Corporal Friedman, who's in charge of their towing program, in an area close to the size of Troop E, was tasked with removing over 100 vehicles from roads across the county. He finally tells the story of how Auto Return systems allowed for the seamless dispatch and tracking of all of these tows, and how the surrounding counties were incurring massive overtime dispatching the tows and subsequently handling customers' requests for lost vehicles. So that's how it looks in a region where members of the towing community are partners in making the system successful. Easy, efficient, and safe. From the police point of view, the dispatcher simply enters the tow request into the system, and that's it. AutoReturn handles everything from that point. Let me give you a sense of how the system works from the point of view of the tow operator. Towers receive dispatch requests any way they would like. Some take automated phone calls from good old-fashioned landlines or cell phones. Others choose to take advantage of increased capabilities available on today's smartphones. But this is not a requirement to be part of the program. The tow request includes the location and other information about the situation that the tower will need to complete the job safely and quickly. They accept the request and go do the job. When they return back to their office with a towed vehicle, we do ask them to enter basic information about the vehicle so it can be found later. License plate, make, model, and ultimately information about how about the fees and when it left their facility. There is no special software to install or administer. They just use any internet browser to go to their AutoReturn page online. When the customer shows up to get his car, the tower bills him for the tow, adding a $35 administrative fee to the total bill. After and only after the customer pays the bill, AutoReturn gets $22.50 for its service fee. The tow company keeps the remaining $12.50 from the administrative fee to cover vehicles that go unclaimed and other costs. The customer receiving the tow pays for the administrative cost of the tow, not the government or the taxpayer. As part of the program, AutoReturn relieves the state police of all of the administration around a tow and any follow-up inquiries after a tow. This is no small burden, freeing the state police to focus on other activities. So that's the way the AutoReturn system works. I'd like to now turn to how AutoReturn got invited. Actually, I'll skip that. It's in the testimony. And you've heard that. So I'm pleased to announce, actually as of yesterday, we are now operating 9 of the 11 stations that are part of the pilot program. Since the beginning of the pilot through Monday, we have facilitated 1,003 tows. Our network grows every week. We are partnering with 43, the pause was, we added some recently, with 43 local Pennsylvania towing companies, with 3 additional companies who have agreed to join and are providing the required documentation. 22 of them towed for the Pennsylvania State Police prior to the pilot, and 21 companies are new to the program. In our proposal accepted by the Pennsylvania State Police, we agreed to integrate our systems with the mobile office, the laptop platform in the squad car in the troopers' vehicles, allowing the state police to further leverage its existing investment in mobile office and to further reduce burden on communications officers and to create a direct communication link between tow operators and troopers in the field. For years, taxpayers in Pennsylvania have paid to fund the state police's towing operations. Now with AutoReturn, as part of this pilot program, the only people who are paying for towing are those who receive the service. As I mentioned before, the amount of the fee to the customer is $35, which gets split between AutoReturn and the towing company. The tax dollars that were being spent on police towing operations can now be freed up for other purposes. Our pilot program has been a success story, starting with Erie. Next slide. Next slide. Starting with Erie, towing companies readily joined our program as they were reluctant to miss out on towing opportunities. Here's a chart of the response times in the pilot area. The green dots, or the green pins, represent tow requests that were on scene within 35 minutes of the request. The yellow represents on scene within 60 minutes, and the instances of red are on scene greater than 60 minutes. Where the network is robust, there is proven success improving response times. In other areas, the results have been not quite as good due to lack of participation. Network coverage is a key factor for the system to work as designed. Gaining network coverage is an incremental process, not yet complete across the pilot area, and we are addressing the challenge day by day. The benefit to citizens so far is that law enforcement agencies are able to do what they do best, keep people safe by getting the PSP out of towing logistics. We realize that implementing the AutoReturn system is a change to the status quo. Everyone acknowledges that change can be difficult. Both the state police and AutoReturn are facing some unfortunate hostility to this important public safety program. Since December, there has been a small but motivated group of towing companies that fear change or want to maintain the status quo that have prosecuted a misinformation campaign and continue to do so even when presented with the facts. Led by these influential operators, a number of other towing companies in Pennsylvania have refused to participate in the pilot program. Through spreading misinformation and untrue allegations, that small handful of operators has made some tow companies refuse to join our program. Many have chosen not only to not join, but refuse to take a phone call from us in lieu of a communications officer to perform a paid tow service in their area to assist the public with no contract and no fee going to auto return, causing increased response times and public safety problems. An example of the misinformation being spread and untrue are stories that I personally own land in Pennsylvania in anticipation of opening auto return impound facilities. People have been told that I own tow companies and tow trucks. Nothing could be further from the truth. I am not in the towing business. Auto Return is not a towing company. We do not own a single tow truck. We are a technology company laser focused on one thing: law enforcement towing logistics. That's all we do. Logistics. Another example of the misinformation that people are being told that we'll come in for one rate, but after a while, we're going to lower the maximum fee or we'll require everyone to buy a smartphone. It's not in our interest to do this. We are not an auto club. We do not gain financially by putting downward pressure on rates because we are simply providing logistics support to this important service. Our opponents are also saying that 911 centers can do what auto return does more effectively. That is simply not true. Just shifting the manual, laborious communication process for allocating tows from police communications officers to 911 operators will not provide any of the efficiencies of the auto return approach I just described. It just makes a different group of people as overburdened by an inefficient process as the current group. Somebody would still be responsible for maintaining a tow company roster, verification of minimum requirements, site inspections, follow-up on requests for information after the tow. The public conversation has gone on without us in a one-sided way so far. This ends today. Historically, we have not engaged the towing community at large. We have not had to in the past. Today, we finally have a public forum so that the actual facts can be shared. To begin with, we have worked successfully with the tow companies who have chosen to participate in the pilot program to change the dispatch model, simplify the contract, as well as respond to many other requests from the state police and the towers to make many other adjustments during the pilot. We are doing in Pennsylvania what we have done with all of our other satisfied customers in Indianapolis, Kansas City, Baltimore County, Concord, California, San Diego, and San Francisco, to optimize the program for safety, efficiency, and public service. Across the country, we have 100% agency referenceability. In 100% of our jurisdictions, response times are reduced, agencies get increased control while reducing administrative burden. It's not just us saying this. Our contracts have been renewed at every occasion, 9 times and counting. The fact is that modern logistics drives the worldwide distribution of goods and services most everywhere on the planet. Without this technology, we would get no mail, UPS or FedEx packages delivered. There would be no online commerce or fresh food delivery at all times of the year. Modern logistics is here to stay. No one can argue that being able to instantaneously contact and engage a statewide fleet of tow operators in service to the needs of the public is a bad thing. Auto Return is bringing this to law enforcement towing. We at Auto Return are honored and grateful to have the opportunity to speak here today, to speak with those who haven't talked with us before. We intend that everyone listening in the room today leave the meeting with a clear understanding of the truth and renewed in the values of respect, fairness, efficiency, and public service, which we believe everyone here shares. I'm personally very grateful to have had the time before you that you've given me the courtesy of your attention. Thank you to the Pennsylvania State Police, who have allowed Auto Return to help transform the way police towing works in the Commonwealth and for how they keep the public safe. Thank you to the hardworking tow operators who put themselves on the line every day, clearing accidents from highways and side streets. We are grateful to be working with you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks. My team and I will be glad to answer any questions you or the committee have for us at this time.
Thank you. Chairman Marsico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your time and your testimony. In your testimony, you mentioned that there are you have a lot of satisfied customers in other cities, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Baltimore County, San Diego, San Francisco, and Concord, California. Well, how many states do you contract with? Those are all cities. Are you contracting with those states?
So the concept of having a transparent view into the location of tow trucks and facilities is a universal truth, and it works both in rural and urban areas.
So do you contract with other states? Other state
We do not.
departments? So this is the first state?
That is correct.
Okay. Further, how do you select? How do you select the towers? What's that selection process like? Is it a rotation with the vendors that are contracted with?
We are able to, our systems and our process are able to dispatch tow companies in many different ways. And we do based on the rules set by or the recommendations of the law enforcement agencies. So one of the methods is the closest facility to the incident. And that is the method we're using here, with some exceptions.
So then, how do you rotate that closest? There could be two towers that are the same.
That's correct. So, I think the safest way to put it is, you can always tweak your towing algorithm, but in the end, you set clear rules and consistently apply them, and fairness is achieved. So I think your point, I believe your question is, if two tow operators are nearby, how do you do that? A rotation would be a very fair method.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wicker, thank you for being here today. As you know, one of the goals of this hearing is to continue the dialogue between the towers, the state police, and auto return in hopes of reaching a resolution to this issue. I must say at the outset I'm disappointed in your characterization of the motives of towers who don't agree with this process. I think we're all looking for a solution here. We're not looking at ways to point fingers or make accusations. Do you understand why many of the towers are reluctant to sign on with auto return? I think the state police testimony indicated some of the tactics used early on were not well received. Are you aware of that?
I think the best way to answer that question would be to let someone from our towing community who is working with the program. The majority of the folks that are opposing the program are not part of the program and have not participated and don't know what it's about, and have been, frankly, my testimony is clear. There is a misinformation campaign being prosecuted out there, and I wanted to make sure that was on the record. Ken, would you like to share your thoughts?
I'll try. My name is Ken Fisher. I own Eagle Auto Service and Collision Center right off Interstate 79 up in Erie County. And we were invited, along with numerous other towing companies in our region, to attend a meeting concerning the pilot program. We were already a pre-approved state police towing facility. We went through all the requirements that everyone else had to up in the area, and we were actively towing for the state police. And we went in and we were informed that the pilot program was going to start up here in Troop E. We were currently towing for Lawrence Park and Girard Barracks. So we in no way were coerced into joining this. We were given the opportunity to either get on the list or not. And looking at the pros and the cons of it from a business standpoint, there was no reason for me not to get on there. No one forced me to do this. We went through the legal documentation concerning liability transfer. We put it off to our insurance company. We went through the requirements that we were going to have to follow. We went through the dispatching changes that we were going to have to comply with, and decided it made sense to at least try. We had nothing to lose. So no one from auto return put any undue pressure on us one way or another to join or not. And that could be, there were numerous tow companies in the area that decided not to. That was their business decision. My business decision was to get on board, and frankly, I'm glad I did.
Mr. Wicker, my question again is to you. Do you understand why the state police talked to you or talked to your company about this and about some of the comments that were made regarding some of the pressure that was put on towers?
So I believe what you're referring to is a conversation where someone from our organization was making a comment to somebody to encourage them to join, saying, the guy down the street's joined, you ought to consider joining from a business perspective. I think that's a completely reasonable. Well, I'll tell you, let me take it a different way. My problem is not with the majority of the folks in this room. I fully respect and work with, across the country, many hundreds of hardworking tow companies that do their jobs, and I respect that. Our problem is with the misinformation campaign being prosecuted by a small subset of towers that has discouraged hardworking, honest tow companies from participating in what could be a very good thing for them. We are not taking business from tow operators. We are simply providing a service to the state police, allowing tow companies to take dispatch requests in a new and different way, a more efficient way, at no cost to them.
Do you believe there is a place for trust in the relationship between auto return and the independent businesses who you work with?
I believe, I think I made that very clear in my testimony. We stand for first, public safety. We stand for efficiency. We stand for respect and a fair distribution of tows. That's what we stand for.
On that regard, let me ask a couple of questions about the process itself, if I may. You're dealing with an area of rural Pennsylvania, which is much different from Baltimore County or cities in California and so forth. An area which is somewhat remote. And my understanding is you use a GPS system to dispatch these tows in this rural area. Have you found that to be successful? There are no problems with that?
Okay, let me share again our dispatch approach. So our dispatch approach is very flexible. In cases where partners choose to use smartphones and GPS information is available, that information can only help in the effective dispatch of a tow request. However, in the absence of that information or using different dispatch algorithms, a suitable tow company can be dispatched, again, more efficiently than through manual methods. So I believe the method we're using in rural areas where cell phone reception is spotty is closest facility to the tow request.
And how do you ensure that the proper equipment is being sent to the scene to make sure that you have the tower is, first of all, has the equipment necessary for say, a heavy tow, and how do you make sure that equipment is being dispatched to that scene?
I mean, in the dispatch request, just as if the communications officer were making the call to the tow company, they are providing the same information in our systems, and that information is being relayed. So it's the exact same way that it's happened always, is the details of the required equipment are put in the request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. First, my first concern in this is public safety. You say that your company is in direct communications with state troopers, their laptops and stuff like that. Well, that's all well and good. As a former police officer, I've been out on the road, and I know these kids, their new cars are all decked out, look like fighter pilots. But the laptop is no good when you're standing on the side of the road out in the cold. You need radio communications. So that's a public safety issue for me, for the emergency responders, for the tow truck drivers that are responding, and for the officers that are on scene, which I don't know how, in any way, shape, or form, you'll be able to work that out, okay? excuse me. Secondly, you say you're not in the towing business, but I have information that you have a impound place in Indianapolis. So are you going to expand to impounding here in Pennsylvania?
Would you like me to take those one at a time?
Yes, if you would, please.
Okay. So you are correct. The beauty of using the laptop capability in the vehicle is a lot of information about the tow has already been recorded. And it's basically a tow button you get to push with very little additional information, and that then can get immediately electronically dispatched based on the rules, based on the business rules, to the appropriate tow operator. It's a very efficient process. This does not preclude an officer in the field, of course, from radioing into his communications center and having them enter the request and getting nearly the same efficiencies. I hope that's clear. Now, on to the our impound operations. It is true, in some municipalities where there is a small, this is the combination, when there is a high volume of tows in a very small square area, square miles, oftentimes municipalities want to control the impound locations and would prefer to have a centralized impound rather than impound spread around that municipality. And in those cases, when cities look for that type of service, we do provide that. We do that in two places. In San Francisco, that tows 50,000 tows in a 50 square mile area, and in Indianapolis, which tows a similar number in a slightly larger area.
Okay, can you?
We have no intention of opening impound facilities as a result of this contract, and we've actually put that into that's a fear that's been raised, and so as one of the the moves of the pilot is we actually put that into our contract to allay those fears. But yet the folks prosecuting the misinformation campaign continue to bring that up as our evil, sinister approach.
Yeah, but don't you think that you should have brought it up? I know when I ran for office, my negatives came out first. I put them out there. If that's going to be a negative, you said clearly that you have no business, you're not in the towing business, you don't do that, and then I have to question you and say you are, and now you're saying that you are.
No, I'm absolutely not. I've never towed a vehicle.
No, you don't tow a vehicle. Okay, let's semantics. You're using words. You are in the business of impounding. It's still related to the towing business in my interpretation of this.
Representative, with all due respect, our business is to be efficient and help local tow operators be efficient in the execution of tows, whether it's to distributed facilities like in Pennsylvania or centralized facilities like we have in San Francisco and Indianapolis. Our job is towing logistics.
If I can, Chairman, just a statement, and then I'll close. All right, sir. Sometimes public safety is a cost. It's a major cost to all communities. Okay, and for us as a government to ensure public safety is above all. I think this pilot program is slap in the face to public safety. It's a slap in the face to our emergency responders. It's a slap in the face, and your arrogance of what you said about these people, these hardworking towers, because they don't agree with you. Just because they don't agree with you, they're rogues. That's not the case. Everybody's in business. They've invested a lot of money. It's not about them with me, okay? It's about everyone. It's about the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and doing things safe. I totally disagree with this pilot program. It's pilot, but it keeps extending through the state. How much of a pilot program are we going to have? If I have anything to do with it, we're going to bring this to a halt, and we're going to move forward in a better way of doing this structure. I know it's not all you. I know it's part of the state police. But public safety is a cost that we in government must incur, okay? And it doesn't mean farming it out or giving it to another company, to a private company. I'd rather see the $23,500 that you've made in Pennsylvania already go to our 911 centers, okay? I totally am astounded by your disrespect to the other towers just because they don't agree with you. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Sonata, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is Auto Return responsible for the background checks of the registered towers?
I believe Colonel Bivens mentioned in his testimony that the state police still do the background checks.
Okay. Now, how do you know, when you hire these towers, that they are up to those standards? I mean, do you meet with them? Do you talk with them? I mean, what relationships do you have with them?
So of the 22 existing Pennsylvania state towers that were already vetted, they met the requirements, and the 21 new towers went through the exact same process that the 22 towers had gone through previously, which involved background checks, inspection of facilities, inspection of equipment, and adequate insurance. Matter of fact, we assign ourselves as additional insureds on their policies so we can ensure that the policies are in force.
No, when I asked, because I had asked the state police, I'm going to ask you the same thing. You know, they're not all Pennsylvania towers. How many do you use from out of state?
We use 2 out-of-state tow operators. They're both in Ohio, and they were both part of the Pennsylvania State Police program prior to the pilot.
And are you having problems filling all the towers?
I'm sorry.
Are you having problems in certain, I mean, it's a rural area, as Representative Stevenson said, and, you know, you have towers who are not signing up.
Okay, if you can refer to the slide that's in your packet, and John's going to put this up on the screen. So I would say that our response has been directly proportional to network participation. So where we have a robust network, what we're seeing is very good response times. Where we're not seeing, where we're seeing response times that can be improved are in areas where we have less of a network. But every day, every week, the network improves, and if you were to look at this thing over time, we're seeing more and more green across more and more of the pilot area.
No, because when I look at it here, I'm looking at, I mean, a lot of it's up in Erie, and I'm down near Lawrence County, and I'm looking, and there's not a whole lot there.
I believe Katanning, we have 3 new towers coming on board, and so I expect to see that those areas of yellow and red improve. And that's the purpose of the pilot, is to create improvement. In every jurisdiction where we've ever gone, we've gone in, and improvements have occurred over time.
No, I asked that because I know that, you know, where I'm at, there's a lot of good towers, and, you know, my recommendation would be try to work with these people because they're very good towers. They've been in business for many, many years, and, you know, just from what I'm listening to and hearing, I mean, I'm here to listen and to learn, and when towers will be coming up, but I still think that, you know, these people have been doing it for many years, and we asked about the response time. These people are on the ground. They've been doing it for years. They know where everything's at. I mean, wouldn't that make sense?
We are trying to work with every single tower. Our invitation extends to every single Pennsylvania State Police tower, and the ones that have chosen to work with us are the ones that have resulted in the response times we see here, but we continue to be willing to work with everyone in this room, including our opposition.
But what happens when you have a bad tower? I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, if someone's not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
A bad tower?
Yeah.
So one of the great things about, you know, well, I'm not sure I like to characterize bad tower, but the data, one of the great things about collection of data is you can evaluate scenarios based on a large pool of data, not just anecdotal incidents. So if you see a particular tower who is consistently late for response times or is consistently turning down tows, then you can address those issues through coaching. And what we found is that effectively, coaching has been a very effective method for us in creating effective networks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Marsico for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the process, when a person who needs a tow who has a service they could use for free, for example, if they have a manufacturer's warranty or they're a member of the AAA, do they have an option to use that service?
I believe they do.
So how does that work then? Walk me through the process. If I need to tow, I have a manufacturer's warranty.
Question.
And then do I then pay the $35?
No. The $35 is only paid on a subset of tows. It's tows where a tow is actually completed. There is no administrative fee or there's no fee paid for roadside assistance, what you're referring to as an owner request tow, those sorts of tows. So, and again, this is to protect the tow operator. The model is if the tow operator is able to collect the fee, then we collect our fee, with the model being to never have a tow company come out of pocket 1 penny to be part of this program. And I don't think that's been clearly communicated.
Okay. Just to follow up, can the customer then designate to where the vehicle was towed, or does Auto Return make that call?
In the case of an owner request tow, the customer dictates where that tow goes. In the case of a Pennsylvania police authorized tow, the tow operator tows it to their facility.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Rapp.
Thank you, sir, for being here today. I was looking at your map, and I did receive some correspondence from Lieutenant Krall, who is with the Pennsylvania State Police. I was specifically interested in, of course, my district, which is Warren Forest, currently McKean. And looking at your map, I see nothing in Warren County. So is there no one there currently participating in the program?
So the Pennsylvania State Police is rolling this pilot out in stations once we feel there's sufficient coverage in that station, and Warren County has not reached that point.
And again, and I will share some of the comments that the other legislators have with the program, because I have several areas in Warren County going over into Crawford and going over into McKean and Elk, where I can drive 45 minutes with not even cell phone coverage. So that certainly is a concern of mine. But and obviously the chart, the larger the network, the better the response. The weaker the network, the slower response. But I do have people attending here today from my district, and they do have many concerns that have been shared here, just to let you know up front. And have you turned down any tow operators that have wanted to work in partnership with you?
None that have met the minimum requirements set by the Pennsylvania State Police.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Gillen.
Thank you very much, again, for your distinguished testimony. I just had a couple brief questions with regard to your business model. I think you had mentioned San Francisco as a city that you operate in, and I think I recall you saying that you had 50,000 tows in San Francisco. Is that accurate? That's right. Okay, and you
That's right.
Yeah, and you control the impound lots in San Francisco. In Pennsylvania, we get $22.50 per tow, correct? What would that number be in San Francisco?
Excuse me? I mean, $22.50 per tow times 50,000?
No, it's exactly the same number.
In San Francisco.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's our rate in San Francisco?
Yeah.
It's a completely different model. The model in San Francisco is we collect the money from two sources. One is when a customer claims their vehicle, and then vehicles that go unclaimed, we dispose of it through the California lien laws. And then we pay the municipality, we pay the tow operator, we pay the labor force. It's a completely different model. This is what we call our logistics model.
Okay. It strikes me if there's any relationship at all between the 2250 and the impound lot, it strikes me that you would be receiving a preponderance of your income from the impound lots in San Francisco?
I mean, I'm not sure I follow. I mean, well, in terms of, I mean, the high-level business model is if we're the logistics model, it's $22.50 per towed vehicle. Is our revenue line. Our cost line is small relative to in an operation where we're running the impound lot, where the revenue per vehicle is in the $200 plus per vehicle, but the costs are in the $180 to $190 range. Much higher costs per vehicle.
The reason I'm asking the question, in terms of how you represented the service that you offered, if you had something close to $22.50 and you're asserting the model is different out there, it'd be about $1 million worth of revenue on a 50,000 vehicle model. But if you just throw out a number, $100 on an impound lot, I'm sure it's substantively more than $22.50, then it would be a $5 million revenue stream. It strikes me that your revenue stream in San Francisco, and maybe it's a legitimate concern here, is substantively coming from what would be traditionally the purview or oversight of tow operators versus the actual tow fee as compared to the impound lot fee. It strikes me that the service that you're offering goes far beyond logistics and technical assistance to an actual arena that tow operators have a substantive revenue stream in Pennsylvania.
I'm not sure I follow the question, but I'll try and answer what I think you're asking.
It's partly a statement, too.
So, you know, our technology, our key value, in my opinion, is the application of technology and business process to this industry that needs some. And the application of technology to the dispatch function does two things. One, it allows disparate tow operators in a large geographic area to be sort of combined into one single virtual fleet that then law enforcement can engage to pick the right vehicle or the right company to fulfill a public safety request. How our technology benefits on the back end is in the customer service function going through is sophisticated call center queues and systems that allow us to track customer requests. We have queue systems that monitor the lines, so when you wait in line for your vehicle to get picked up, it's like Hertz Gold service instead of standing in line in an inefficient release process. Our average customers wait 73 seconds in that other model. Also, the application of following a car through the lien process if it goes unclaimed and selling it through the proper regulatory process and submitting excess fees in excess of your towing and storage fees to the appropriate municipal and state agencies is all part of things that systems can play a tremendous effect and have.
The technology is welcome, and we appreciate that. I think the prospect of future competition is what concerns some of the folks that are in this room. And based on the San Francisco business model, it appears there's a significant revenue stream coming from an arena which would represent competition to some of the operators in this room. Thank you, sir.
Representative James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wicker. I've been involved since January of this year in trying to understand what the benefit was to the Pennsylvania State Police in taking this step to begin with, and I'm still collecting facts. Thank you. Originally, it sounded like it would free up the time of some of the dispatchers. Perhaps that's not really going to be much of a benefit to them, but ultimately today I think we heard that the primary goal was to avoid upwards of $1 million annual litigation, which they're experiencing from tow responders who are dissatisfied with their service, which gets me around to my question. Are you experiencing any kind of litigation problems in some of your other areas? And if it ends up costing you $1 million a year once it's statewide here, is this something you're interested in doing, or will you terminate your contract?
I mean, we do have legal expense. It's managed as part of our business. But I actually think the real question goes back to, is the benefit in the efficient dispatching? And I believe it really is. I think that, I said it in my testimony, and I guess reading it doesn't create the energy around it, but having a real-time view into where the assets are deployed across a state when there's an emergency only provides data to make better decisions. And those better decisions result in decreased response times and increased public safety. And that's just a truism, and it's happened that way everywhere we go. And we continue to see it in this pilot, and we're going to continue to see it as their network grows.
Nothing else, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hackett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for the gentleman from the towing business. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Ken Fisher.
Ken Fisher. Ken, do you also tow for local municipalities?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. About how long have you been doing that?
About 2 years.
Okay. How long have you been in business? I'm sorry.
Well, I have several businesses.
Okay, the towing business.
The towing business, 2 years.
2 years. Okay. Over the past 2 years that you've been towing for local municipalities, how do you get your dispatch jobs? How do you receive that?
If it's for a local, the individual that needs towed will actually call us.
Let's talk police tows. So police tows for those local municipalities, how do they come about?
The police departments for the local municipalities don't call us. They have their own tow operators in their own municipalities.
So you're not towing for the local police municipalities?
No, we do not. No, if somebody's double parked or something, no, we do not do that.
No, how about a crash, an accident?
If it's a crash, if it's in PSP area.
No, it's not. It's in the local municipality where they have their own police department.
No, if they called us, we would, but right now we do not.
Okay, but you don't have a contract with a local municipality to handle their police tows.
No, we do not.
You're only doing state work there.
State and private towing.
State and private. Okay, so then you want to have knowledge of how those calls are dispatched to the local police for those tows. Do you hear any rumor? How do you think they're getting dispatched?
I would think that the local, I would guess now, I would imagine that the local police would call their dispatcher, and the dispatcher would call the tow company.
Okay, and your experience of that, maybe hearing stuff on the radio or seeing some incidents, does that seem to be going okay?
Could you ask that again?
In the local municipalities, for those police departments being dispatched, do you see any problems there? Can you give me any feedback of what the industry's feeling as to that respect?
I cannot. I do believe that the same companies that are towing for PSP tow for the local municipalities.
Okay, and they don't have any problems. And again, maybe this might not be towards you.
I guess I'm
the
not
other
qualified
tow
to
guy,
answer that. So.
I'm sorry. You're also a tower? Do you tow for local municipalities? No. Okay. Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wicker, I do agree with you that Pennsylvania State Police should not be in the towing business. Okay, but I disagree that the 911 centers aren't doing a bang-up job at dispatching to the scene tow trucks that those local municipalities, which they represent, are asking for. And I believe that's working quite well. But this is very interesting, and thank you for your time there, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fisher, can I follow up with a couple questions, if you would, please? When you signed with Auto Return, is your fee schedule towing rates, are they the same today as they were as when you were towing basically for the state police?
We adjusted them slightly. Some went up slightly, some went down slightly, based on the maximum, the recommendations from Auto Return. However, we had already had rates established, and I'm not going to say by the Pennsylvania State Police. They were recommended rates and guidelines that we followed prior to being with Auto Return. They were within 5% of our current rates.
Okay. Do you maintain a different rate schedule for non-Auto Return or non-state police tows that you do?
We do not.
The administration fee that you can you tell us how you administer that? The administration fee for Auto Return to get their $35.
If we get a call for a tow, once we enter the data into the system, if it's a roadside assistance or if it's just pull them out of a ditch and away they go, we enter it as such, and there is no fee going to Auto Return, zero. If we actually tow it back to our facility or tow it to another garage, the fee is on our books is $35. We have an account that once every 2 weeks, they will do a direct withdrawal from that account, send us an email, and it's all electronic.
So when I get my bill for towing, when I stop my car is towed in an accident, and I show up at your shop to recover my car. I get charged for the tow, the storage, an administration fee.
That's correct.
On top of that, that's
exactly
the
what it
35.
says. That's right,
So
administration fee.
the consumers of Pennsylvania are being charged basically $35 for a service today that currently they aren't paying for. Is $35 a fair fee? I know if you do you do inspections of emission inspections at your facility?
Do.
And that phone call to send that data to the state costs you how much?
I don't know that.
About $1.35, I think it is.
I don't know
to report that, but we're going to allow another company to come in and charge $35 for a phone call. Basically, you're going to get a phone call from them telling you to respond to a tow, where and how, and it just seems like an awful lot of money to me. If I can, Mr. Wicker, can we talk a little bit about your rate schedule? How do you establish that? Is it a regional rate schedule, or is it one rate schedule for? I mean, Pennsylvania is a large state. Is it one rate schedule for the whole state of Pennsylvania, or will be?
Are you talking about the rate schedule that the towers charge the charge the customers? No, it's regional.
How many regions?
That is actually continuing to being worked out, and there's no set program right now.
Okay. And then it says in your contract that there are exceptions allowed in the fee schedule.
Yes, there are.
How is that? Who determines that this tow came under an exception?
The tow operator.
The tow
Actually,
operator.
this is a great opportunity to share sort of the framework of the rates. So when we came in and they asked us to put reasonable maximums in place, we took the information that tow operators had already provided the Pennsylvania State Police, and we hashed through that data and submitted to the subset that we approached in, I believe it was October or November. What do you think about this? And they came back with feedback that this is too low, this seems high, and we based the continuing modifications of these rates based on input from the tow operator. Again, we're not an auto club, and I really want to stress that. Our model does not, since we're not buying bulk tows, and that's not on our expense line, we're not motivated to push down the price for tows. Our job is to set reasonable maximums in place. And here's the key. Everybody, they only apply to your standard tow. An extraordinary circumstance is a line item, extraordinary circumstance, and that applies to anything that falls outside the ordinary tow. So every tow operator in this room is free to charge whatever they need to charge for the vehicle that's down the ditch, down the embankment, and under the tree, whatever that is, and that is not something we want to get involved in beyond allowing the tow operator to charge what's reasonable and customary for that type of transaction. And I think that's another piece of misinformation that's been spread out there that we're trying to,
Okay, so you do not, if I charge a consumer a fee over and above the normal tow rate, then you don't get involved. You don't dispute that with them. You don't call them up, or you don't get a letter from you saying we think you're overcharging on these fees.
No. If the tow operator, now let's be clear. Let's say that one tow operator had an extraordinary circumstance every single time, right? That would show up in our data, and we might begin to look at that in an odd way. However, again, I've even disagreeing with Representative Costa's comments, I have the utmost respect and work with across the country tow operators, and I believe that the extraordinary circumstances happen all the time, and it is not our business to get involved in that. And tow operators should be free to charge what is normal and customary for whatever the job is, without interference from some auto return group looking at their fees and doing a unilateral decision on it.
Is there, if you have a tower is charging above the in the exception area of all the or above normal times according to your calculations, and you dispute that with them, what process then do you use to bring that tower back in line? Is there a due process in place? Do you penalize him? Do you remove him from the list?
Sure. Okay. So we would never go to look at a tow and say that's out of line. They put an extraordinary circumstance. We weren't at the scene. We don't have information. We don't know what happened. So what could happen, however, is a customer could come and say, you know what, I don't like that fee. And then again, we try to come to a resolution. And if we can't, we use a simple arbitration process to get that resolved. We, again, don't want to get in the middle of tow disputes between citizens and tow operators. So, as a matter of fact, I think it's only happened once since the pilot began, and I don't recall the tow company. It may be here in this room, I'm not sure, but it was a situation where there was may have been some miscommunication. The great thing is we had all the data. We had every communication. We had the notes from the dispatcher, from the police communication officer. We knew the time. We knew every single thing about the tow. So, weeks after this tow had transpired, we were able to go back and have the actual data of everything that transpired to help us move through this process. And in this case, it was and I apologize for not having great command of the details, but this was a case where a person was on the side of the road, they needed some gasoline, and the tow truck operator who showed up did not bring gasoline. Perhaps the trooper said they would bring gasoline, but the regulations actually say you don't have to carry gasoline due to safety concerns. I know some people do. But in this case, the person did not, and they towed it to a facility. I believe the charge was $244. It was 2 hours of time, or maybe it was 3 hours. Long and short of it is, we took one look at it and said it seems reasonable to us, and the citizen obviously could go take it further course of action. But we agreed with the tow operator. So.
So if there's a consumer complaint, this consumer complaint is settled by you with an arbitration board.
If there's a consumer complaint, if they can't resolve it themselves, it goes to an arbitration process that we only administer, we don't vote on. How's that for a way to describe it?
Then how is it resolved? Who administers it?
Well, we set the framework in place. We don't want to be at odds with the tow companies, so our goal is not to get in and say, we think this.
Okay.
Right.
If the tower has a complaint, who do they go to?
Describe a type of complaint.
I guess if they're not getting paid, if they feel that if they're removed from a towing list, if you're not calling the tower in the closest available tow, where does that complaint go? Does it go to your arbitration board?
It certainly can, yes. So at first it goes to us, we try to resolve it, and then it goes to arbitration. We've been to arbitration in our history 3 times. John.
It's less than 5.
3 times. I nailed it.
Okay. Am I right in asking you, is the tower to become an auto return tower, the tower must sign his rights to sue away?
Okay. So
I think that's a question of yes or no.
Actually, I prefer to answer it in a. The cost of litigation is painful. So there was one way the best way to reduce litigation costs is to come to agreement. So again, we've only been to arbitration 3 times. So that kind of gives you a sense with over a million tows, we've been to arbitration 3 times. I think that gives you a sense of what type of company we are, how we care about respect and fairness, and yes, you do. You're asked to sign an arbitration clause to make the process of resolving disputes less costly.
If you fail to do proper inspections according to your contract with the PSP, proper inspections of the towers, making sure that they have their criminal background checks and that they meet all the requirements of the field regulation, AR 6-2, what in the contract, what penalty is there for you in the contract that you've signed with the state police?
Our contract is very brief. It just refers to different codes. So I'm sure it would be whatever administrative rights the state has.
How is the inspection process working now? Apparently, you've brought in a lot of new towers
21.
that have never qualified for the state police before, but now all of a sudden.
Well, I would choose to characterize it as didn't choose to work with the state police before for a variety of reasons. I would not say that they didn't qualify. But yes, we've gone through the inspection process.
What is that? Can you give us that number? Of the number of how many of the people working for you currently today that did not qualify before with the state police now work
I could
for you?
get that number for you. I don't have that number.
Could you supply that to the committee?
Certainly.
Okay, I appreciate it. How many out-of-state towers do you have working in the pilot program?
I believe someone asked that question. We have 2. They're both in Ohio, and they were both existing Pennsylvania State Police towers prior to the pilot.
I think a lot of the towers, especially when you go statewide, I think maybe it's more common in the southeast. A lot of the towers tow for the state police, and they also tow for municipalities around the state. And I know in my legislative district, quite a few of the municipalities have separate contracts with a designated tower. So then that tower would be required to basically have an AR rate schedule, and also then have a municipal rate schedule, which there may be a difference between the two rate schedules. The tower, the consumer might be paying more or less under yours rate schedule. Is it fair to the consumer that a tower has to maintain basically two rate schedules?
I'm not sure how to answer that question, sir.
Okay. An abandoned vehicle. When a tower in Pennsylvania tows an abandoned vehicle, and correct me if I'm wrong, from best of my knowledge, I think the tower, you would dispatch abandoned vehicle calls from the state police, right? That someone just leaves their car on the side of the road and walks away from it.
I believe that is a reason code that is part of the state police.
Yes.
Yes.
And under the current law, I think they get $15 for that tow. Would they also then, would they be assessed that $35 fee from your company if they successfully complete that transaction of towing an abandoned vehicle?
No.
So there's no way to collect that $35 fee on. So pretty much you're saying all abandoned vehicles in the state we're not charging for. There's very
we are not collecting our $22.50 on that. We don't believe it's fair to charge the tow operator a administrative fee if they are not able to collect the fees from consumer.
Okay.
And again, I think this is part of the misinformation campaign that's been prosecuted, and I really relish the opportunity to get this information on the record to, again, the hardworking tow companies that are here hearing from us for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And that's why we want to have the hearing, to believe me, we hear from both sides. I mean, we've heard from the state police and other entities that, of tower activity that they don't approve of. We've heard from the towers that, there's activity taking place here. I've complained for years about a lack of a due process for our towers under the state contract and under the municipal contract. So the main purpose of the hearing is to try to get to some of that information.
I think if you talk to our towers across the country, what you'll find is that initially they all feared us. I mean, they all feared a new entity that they did not know, they did not understand. They didn't have a track record with us, and it was scary. And we understand and respect that. And historically, we haven't again done outreach to the towing community at large because we would, again, engage the towing community that we worked with, and then they would turn around and become staunch supporters of ours. As a matter of fact, this Pennsylvania, the headwinds we faced in Pennsylvania have actually changed our marketing approach nationwide. We're actually attending the Las Vegas Tow Show. I'm flying there on Friday. It's Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. We're addressing for the first time the public tow companies at large to sort of dispel the rumors. Because again, as I mentioned in my testimony, it's been a one-sided conversation. And we have chosen not to participate in the conversation because we haven't had to, and now we are.
Okay. Thank you. One last question. Just walk me. I know Chairman Marsico built on this, but while he was asking a question, things were popping into my brain to questions to follow up on. But the current call, the 911 center, there's an accident on the highway. The 911 center is called by the motorist or a passing motorist sees the accident, calls the 911 center. That call then in certain areas will then be transferred to a state police communications officer who then will, on their computer, will pull up your software that will locate then to them the closest tower. Or is that done in your facility in California? You get the call from the PCO, and then your people then send a dispatch either by email or phone call or whatever to the following.
So I believe in that situation, the police communications officer would dispatch a trooper, and that trooper would arrive and assess the scene and determine if there were a need for a tow truck. But I want to highlight one point. The vast majority of, you guys keep calling goes to California. I would say across our network, 90% of the tows are handled electronically. And that's really the power and the beauty of the system is whether it be radioed in by a trooper in the field or entered into mobile data terminal in their trooper's vehicle, or a parking control officer enters it in their systems, 90% of the time, the system determines through a fair process who the right driver is with the appropriate equipment who's available to take the tow instantaneously and sends a digital request to that operator. And if the operator has chosen not to take digital requests, a phone call goes to that chosen operator.
How long between that?
Milliseconds.
Okay, so I get an email or I get a contact on my iPhone says, I need you on Route 1, 202, accident. How do you determine what the appropriate piece of equipment is if you can't see it? Does the
trooper or the communication officer does?
They'll say a light wrecker, heavy wrecker, whatever
Correct, yes.
type of wrecker is needed then at that
Yes.
point. Okay, so then
I wish
email comes in, I don't respond to it. I mean, is it 2 minutes
Exactly.
later? Is it 3 seconds later?
Thank you for the opportunity to answer that. So we spent a great deal of time thinking through that process. So the issue becomes, so instantaneously, I mean, I'm not prepared for a demo, but if we were sitting here with our automated dispatch system and hit the send button, the cell phone that if the person's, if the chosen company is set up for the mobile device, that cell phone would ring nearly instantaneously. How many, is it less than a second, John?
It's like between 1 and 5 seconds.
Between 1 and 5 seconds, the phone goes off, and it makes a loud noise. And that's one of the annoyances of the existing operators, that they want us to get a better volume button on that. We'll get that handled. That operator then has some period of time to answer that response. I believe it's 1 minute. Now, there are two situations that typically transpire. One is they're holding it in their hand, they see it, and they make it stop doing it, or they don't hit the right button, but they actually intend to head toward the tow. The other situation is it's sitting in their car, they're outside of their vehicle, and something's happening, and they're not getting that thing. So what we've chosen to do at that time is stop the automation. Now it's time for a human being to get involved for a variety of reasons. They could be in a bad cell zone. There could be no data communication in that area. So our workflow system basically says if 1 minute, or is it 2, John?
In different regions, the alert comes in 1 or 2 minutes.
Right.
And there's a second alert.
So if the workflow is not, if it's not going according to plan, an auto return dispatcher gets involved and makes a phone call instantly to that guy. If they don't answer, they'll call the station center. But the long and short of it is they, using human skills, determine whether that company is capable of responding to the request or not. And if they're not, they have a map. They have situational awareness. And they make, based on the business rules, the next person gets dispatched, and the same thing transpires. That alert comes to their device if they've signed up for that program. Again, you don't have to have a smartphone. It could come to your land phone, when you press 1 to accept the tow.
But how can you tell us that system is going to result in faster response time?
It has everywhere we've gone.
Directly to 911 to the trooper currently dispatches, if I can ask a question, if the trooper dispatches the towing operator from the CPO dispatches the towing operator. It cuts out the middleman. We're bringing in a layer of bureaucracy into this operation.
I don't believe the 911 operator, and this is my understanding, and I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but I believe the 911 operator sends a trooper to assess the situation, and that trooper has to determine what the needs are. An operator, a passing motorist isn't going to say, I need a 10,000 gross vehicle weight. They're not going to have that information, and that information the 911 operator is not equipped to handle. So what we've discovered, and don't ask me, ask all of our customers, response times get better and continue to get better as we work through whatever the issues are in the municipality and or in the law enforcement agency. And it's proven everywhere we go. We're not a threat to towing companies. It doesn't cost the tow companies a penny. They get to interact, instead of with state police, they're interacting with new forms of technology, which I understand can be scary. But if you choose to, you can operate with the same phones that you've used in the past, and things are tracked. You can follow up, and there's actually protections for the tow operators. One of the things that our smartphone customers really like is the ability to take pictures of the vehicle before they tow it. So the great thing about smartphones is you've got cameras on them. When you're at the scene and you've hit the on-site button, there's a camera option. You can start snapping pictures of pre-existing damage. people that use that have reduced their claims expense. So again, we are in a market that municipalities across the country are interested in this program. They want to get out of the towing business. They're coming more and more to auto return. In the last 18 months, Indianapolis, Kansas City, and Pennsylvania State Police. I've got a couple more NFL cities that are right on the horizon I can't announce right now. But the law enforcement agencies are choosing more and more to move to logistics. And we are the leader in this space, and we can do for Pennsylvania what we were doing for other municipalities. We're not a threat to the towing companies.
Mm-hmm.
We want to work with you, not compete against you. And I'm finally glad to have an opportunity to have a forum to speak to folks who I've been unable to contact before because, for whatever reason, they won't take our phone calls, they don't want to listen to us. So hopefully this is the beginning of a constructive dialogue with many of the people in this room.
Thank you. Is there any other Representative Costa, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wicker, in your direct testimony, you stated that you're not a tower. You don't want to be a tower. Okay. Let's see. To be clear, Auto Return is not a towing company. We do not own a single tow truck. I'm looking at an article, and I pulled it up on my the technology in Washington, the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. May 16th, in a protest letter from your attorney, apparently Bernard Vogel, he claims that you are. Auto Return, to quote, Auto Return was and currently is a registered tow truck operator in the state of Washington. Because you were canceled out on an RFP, and to be able to get into that contract, apparently you had to be a registered tow truck operator in there.
Okay, so
are you or are you not?
No, this is a great example of the misinformation campaign that's been brought against us. I actually, give me 1 minute to respond to this. There was a requirement in order to bid on the logistics contract to dispatch the tows in the state of Washington, in Seattle, that you must be a registered tow truck operator in the state. And that requirement had been put in place by existing operators to keep companies like us out. And so what we had to do was obtain a registered tow truck operator license. And what we actually did to do that was we found a truck. We actually had to spend money putting the light bar on it and putting a badging on it. And our competitors parade that one picture around. I've seen it many times. Matter of fact, I think I saw it from the Pennsylvania State Police. Claim that we're now we're a towing company. We've never put a driver in that truck. We've never towed a vehicle with that truck. We don't intend to tow a vehicle with that truck. And, again, we're not in the towing business. We're not a tower.
All right,
but again, I've shared that with the folks that continue to share that information with folks in this deliberate misinformation campaign.
Well, then you were misrepresenting yourself to Washington then.
We're getting into semantics. Oh, please.
I have no further questions. That's fine, sir. Thank you. If you want to continue your answer, go ahead, but I have no further questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Since the hearing has begun, we've been joined by at least two other representatives, Representative Reagan and also Representative Barbin, who I will recognize for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. My question kind of follows up on Representative Costa's. The idea that you are what you do seems to depend on what state you're applying to. And one of the questions that has come up today, and I think it's the reason for the hearing, is the fact that you've had this pilot program and a lot of people haven't been able to participate up to this point. The question seems to be about liabilities. How do you manage liabilities that are associated with getting tows? And I guess what my question is, in any of your other business areas, whether it's Washington or Pennsylvania or any other state, have you ever provided services that allow the agency themselves to operate the whatever your cloud technology is? Because I'm wondering why the agency isn't the person who's making the fair decision of what company is called out to do the work, as opposed to you making the decision through your technology.
Okay, so I'll answer that in two parts. The first one was people can't participate. Again, I'll offer it up to everyone in this room or everyone who's in the pilot area. We would like to work with any qualified Pennsylvania State Police tow operator who is willing to join the program. We would like to turn all of these little bullets or these pins to green, and no one has been excluded from the program. Your second question is, can you repeat it briefly? I apologize.
The question is, has your technology been allowed to be used in any other state without you deciding who the people are that are called?
Very, very good question. So Concord, California, so we actually want to provide that service. And so we actually ran, it's a small town, it's called Concord, California, where they were interested in using our solution and having their own dispatchers run the program. That's great. We're happy to offer that solution. What we're finding is law enforcement agencies across the country haven't been interested in that. What they're interested in is getting out of the towing business and having a company whose best practices business model, whose FAQ database, who are trained and focusing on optimizing the logistics around municipal towing and being able to leverage the learnings across all of our customers to create a seamless, efficient response. That's what the market is saying to us.
Do you have any competitors that provide that technology without running the fairness decisions?
There are hundreds of software providers in the towing industry, but there is no law enforcement cloud-based platform anywhere near as robust as ours. Ours has been developed over nearly a decade, and it is we compete in various markets, and when things go to RFP, we generally win. We haven't found a competitor out there that if someone's looking for a fully functioned, full life cycle solution, Auto Return's the best solution.
And Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions, but I'd like to make the following comment. One of the problems with this hearing, or why we're having the hearing today, is despite your belief that you have the most robust platform, the fact of the matter is nobody else was allowed to participate in a request for proposal, which is, and we're now here looking at the question from the industry is raising questions. Various law enforcement agencies are worried that this is going to be extended to maybe other municipalities, and we don't have any way of knowing whether even the people that should have been involved in the original process were even contacted before you were provided this pilot project opportunity. And because it affects so many different issues, I think we should be looking to some of the other people that have been doing this for a long time, whether they're county emergency or the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And I just think we're running this way too fast without knowing what the facts are from the people that are involved. But thank you.
Representative Saccone. After Representative Saccone asks his question, we finish this up. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So we've been sitting here for quite a while, and I would ask everyone to be back as promptly as possible. So Representative Saccone.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, I think it's really important to follow up on Representative Barbin's question, because I asked the question earlier of the state police. Were there other people who responded to the request for proposal? And when the testimony was that there were 3. So I need to know, is this a no-bid contract, or were there other people qualified that were able to respond, and then there was a competition for you to win this? Do you know the answer to that, or do we have to go back to the state police for that?
I'm not the right person to answer that question, but my understanding is there were 3 bidders, and we scored the highest of the 3 bidders. But I'm not the right person to ask that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I agree with that. We should have, in my right, I've filed numerous right-to-know requests. Now that you raised that issue, I probably should have asked for that in my right-to-know request, so I apologize. But Mr. Wicker and your panel, thank you for your patience and testimony here today. Thank you. Okay, did you have something to say?
Thank you.
Okay, great. We're going to be back here in 10 minutes, if you can. Okay, be prompt.